How's everybody doing? Good. That was strong. Is it because I'm holding this instrument? Yeah, we'll get to this in a second here. So first of all, let me say I'm really, really glad that you're here. Really glad. I'm confident that some of you were here on Easter last weekend and you chose to come back again this weekend. And I just want you to know how much I respect that choice. And I have to imagine if your life's like mine, there were 100 things that could have gotten in between, maybe tried to get between your good intentions of coming back and actually being here, and you're here. And I'm just really, really grateful. I hope that this feels like a spiritual journey for you week in and week out in your experience here. Now, you're probably wondering why I'm holding this trumpet right now. And the truth is, I'm actually regretting right now that I'm holding this trumpet. But I thought, well, a lot of you are new. Let me tell you a little bit about my story. So I grew up in a very small town. Let me rewind for you. I've served this church since I was 21 years old. 21 years old, long, long time. For 4 years, we don't have to clap for that. No. For 4 years before that, I was doing my undergrad studying to be a pastor. And my whole life before that was in a very, very small town in rural West Central Illinois. Now, one of the things I've noticed living up here among a larger population and honestly larger school systems is that there's a way I can tell the story from my childhood that can make it sound very impressive to people who don't know what it's like to grow up in a small town. Right now, my small town has smallness credibility. I took driver's ed as one of my high school classes, and when we took the driver's test, which I did with one of my basketball coaches, we were in my hometown, which did not have a stoplight, but a stoplight was required for the test. And so he said, "Pretend there's a stoplight. It's green, it's green, it's green, it's yellow, it's red." That's exactly how I took my driver's test. This is a small town, okay? And I'll tell people that, I was a multi-sport athlete in high school. Sounds impressive, but it's not actually that impressive in a small school. And I played in the band. I really did. Sometimes I'll tell people I played in the concert band and in the jazz band and in the pep band and in the marching band. I was actually the drum major. This is true. I was a drum major of our marching band my senior year of high school. And people think, wow, that's amazing. But I'm like, well, it's not like we tried out. Everybody made it. And if you were part of the concert band, it meant you had to be in the jazz band, the pep band, and the marching band. That's the way that it worked. Actually, can I tell you a quick story? Of course I can. I got the platform. I got the microphone. Basketball. I was much better at basketball than I was at band. And so my sophomore year of high school, I got to dress with the varsity team. Again, not that impressive, but it was a big deal to me. And my coach had an arrangement with the band director that the sophomores who get to dress for the varsity basketball game, if they're starters, they don't have to, in their uniform, go sit in the pep band and play the songs during the game. But if you're not a starter, you had to go sit in the pep band with your uniform on and then come over to the bench. This is a small town. I'm just telling you, okay? Now, Jenny and I, my wife and I, we grew up in the same area. We actually sat next to each other in middle school band, both playing the trumpet. And then I got braces, and I couldn't handle this small mouthpiece anymore. I shifted to the baritone, and I got to tell you, I was never very good at playing. But the baritone section with the trombones and the baritone saxophone, the rhythm section, right, instead of the melody section, much more fun for people to hang out back there. And then they asked me to be the drum major. And the reason they asked me to be the drum major, you might be thinking, oh, he's got some leadership gifts. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. But I was a terrible baritone player. She was trying to get me out of the band and up front. So I have this trumpet. Now, I haven't played a trumpet for many, many years. I tried this a little bit ago. This is not even mine. A friend of mine, gave it to us today. And I thought maybe I could play a scale, but I can't. So you won't hear me playing a scale. But I can blow a note. So let's try this. You hear that? Do not. That is not worth applause. Okay, so when I was in college, I was in a chapel service, and one of my professors opened the service by bringing a trumpet and playing essentially what I just played for you. And then it was kind of odd because it was out of nowhere, and then nothing happened. And then kind of at the pause, before the message, again, a trumpet played. And then he brought a trumpet out with him, and it played. And that one chapel service that I was at ruined the trumpet for me. or possibly redeemed it. Because every time I hear a trumpet, ever since that time in college, it makes me think of something, and I'm going to ruin or redeem the sound of a trumpet for you this weekend. So we're starting this series. It's called Heaven, When, What, and Who. And it's a challenging series to teach because heaven, by its very nature, is indescribable, and we're going to try to describe it to you. Whenever I teach on heaven, I always have multiple people come up to me and they say, yeah, Greg, but what about hell? What about hell? And I got to tell you, there's 3 different types of people who come up and say that to me. Some of them are curious. They want to know. If you're going to talk about heaven, will you also talk about hell? I get that. Some of them are concerned. They carry a burden. They want people to understand the consequences of hell, and they genuinely want a message that helps people understand what the reality of hell. But some of them are condemning. They're like, you're going to get them, right, Greg? It's the judgy, condemning Christians who want to make sure that right alongside heaven, I'm giving you hell, right? And that's always made me a little bit uncomfortable. And so as I was preparing this, I thought, well, I don't want to avoid the reality of hell right alongside heaven. I did a little looking in the scriptures. This is kind of an interesting fact. In the Bible, the word hell appears 15 times, none in the Old Testament, all in the New Testament. In the Bible, the word heaven appears 622 times. 276 of those are in the New Testament. These are both realities, but they're not treated the same way in the scriptures. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Now, if someone was an expert in like the end times and in the scriptures, in eschatology, that's the kind of theological name of this category, and I can't claim to be an expert, but I've studied this a lot. They would come at these numbers and say, well, that's not quite accurate because even though the word hell isn't used, different descriptions are used about the gnashing of teeth and a lake of fire and different things, and that's absolutely fair. And different Hebrew words in the Old Testament and Greek words in the New Testament are translated to be different things that you might refer to hell. That's perfectly fair. And even in the heavens, that number's probably inflated because the word heaven gets used in different ways that doesn't necessarily mean eternity. It talks about the heavens and the earth and God created. That's also all totally fair. I'm not trying to escape that. There is a reality of hell and there is a reality of heaven, but it doesn't change the frequency idea. And there's something to this frequency idea, which is why I'm doing a series called Heaven. It's because I think the scriptures have a reality-based approach to this that we'll talk about both of them. But this approach of the scriptures is not fear-mongering. It is not fear-based. It is not come at them with hell and scare it out of them. It is not. It is invitational to say there is something in the afterlife. It's called heaven. And let me keep describing it to you. Let me keep imagining it with you. It is so beautiful, not just because of what we'll experience, but because of how it honors God, that if we speak about that enough, people will be drawn to it in the healthiest of ways. And it's possible that you grew up in a church that did it a different way, that came at hell hard and frequently. And I just want you to appreciate what's going on here, that I'm absolutely doing my best to honor the scriptures in teaching this the way I'm going to teach it. Now, if you're going to talk about heaven and you're going to say when and what and who, one of the challenges for me in going into the message was to the series was, where do you put who? Because the who question is the most important of the 3 questions. Tonight's question will be important, next week's also, but we placed who at the end of this series. And the who question is like, oh, do you have confidence about yourself, the loved ones that you have who may or may not be on the path to heaven? Like, who really, really matters. And so I want to give a small nod to who in each of the messages. And one of the most helpful ways I think to think about this is, you'll hear people say, why would God send people to hell? But this is critical to the series. This is all within our choice. We choose. C.S. Lewis said it this way. He said, there are only 2 kinds of people in the end. Those who say to God, thy will be done. I trust you, God. I'm going with you. I'm going with your way. I want it your way. And those to whom God says in the end, thy will be done. You want to go your own way? You want to reject me? You want to walk away from me? I'm not forcing you. Thy will be done. And it's a big deal in the midst of this conversation. So with that in mind, let's ask the question about heaven. What? When you think about heaven, there's both kind of a process and there's a moment that is really, really important. And I'm going to talk about them both today a little bit. The process, which essentially describes what happens from when you die up until you kind of make your way through the things to experience eternity with God. The scriptures talk about these. It's descriptive. It's helpful. In some ways, it's beautiful. I think for people who are curious, it helps us because almost all of us actually, if we're going to go through something, we'd like to have it described to us beforehand so we can have a sense of what that's going to be. That process is important, but I'm only going to spend a little time on the process because the process is settled. Once you're in the process, there's nothing you can do about it. Everything is out of your control. It is the moments, well, that's what I'll also talk about. There are a couple of moments, our own deaths or the second coming of Christ, that are the defining moments that activate the process. And it's important to talk about the moments because we have all kinds of choices leading up to the moments. We get to be prepared for the defining moment. And I want us to see both of these in their process. So let me talk about the process first. First, I'm going to talk about the process that happens at death. Everybody dies. Every human being, we're all going to die. You might think about your own death. And some of us do more than others. For some of us, it feels frightening. For others, it feels uncertain. For some, it feels with some anticipation. I don't know if you've ever been with someone when they literally died. I have on a few occasions. And when the process of death happens, two things happen right away. One is the spirit departs the body. And then there's an immediate presence with God for that spirit. And I just want you to think, like there have been a few times, and it's not always dramatic, it's not always obvious, but there have been a couple times it has been obvious where I watched someone breathe their last, and it's almost as if you can see or experience the spirit leaving the body. Now, this is temporary. As we talked about last week on Easter, there will later be a time when the body and the spirit are reunited. But the reason we know this is what happens is from the scriptures. So let me read you two passages from Jesus' words literally on the cross about his death and about the death of one of the criminals who is with him. He says this, Jesus answered him, this is the criminal next to him, today I truly tell you, today you will be with me in paradise. That criminal's body was not going to paradise, but his spirit was going to paradise. And paradise is a place that when we die, you go to be in the presence of Christ. When Jesus is talking about his own death on the cross, he says, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. And when he had said this, he breathed his last. And the spirit separated from the body for a period of time. This is what happens in the process after our deaths for the follower of Jesus. The scriptures actually don't give us that much of a description. I don't feel like I can be an expert to you on what happens for the person who's not a follower of Jesus. But if you follow Jesus, if you've said, thy will be done, I trust you, I surrender my life to you, then I just want you to know, your spirit will depart your body and you'll be present with God. Actually, Paul is writing about this later, and he writes something actually on the occasion where he's facing his own death. And he's kind of wrestling with it. He says, I'm torn between the two, living or dying. I desire to depart and be with Christ, which is better by far. And I got to tell you, the most important person in my life who has died is my dad. It'll be 10 years this summer. And I think back to that a lot. And this is the phrase that carried me through the first week after he was gone. That when he departed, for him, it was better by far because he is with Christ. That's the process that happens when you die. Then there's the process that happens at Christ's return. Now, when I was preparing this message, I thought a little bit, and I thought, one of the things that happens to me, and it kind of surprises me still, is that I'm reminded that because so many people are part of our church who came from having no church background at all, that there are some things about Christianity that I take as basic and fundamental, and everybody knows that. And then I learn after I teach on the subject, actually everybody didn't know that. How would they know that? They didn't grow up in church, or the church they were in wasn't understandable to them. And this is one of those things to say, I kind of assume knowledge, but I don't want to, that everyone knows the promise of Christ when he ascended into heaven after his resurrection is that he would return. And we live right now awaiting Christ's return. And on the return of Christ, there will be the resurrection of our earthly bodies, and there will be a judgment day. Now, the resurrection of our earthly bodies is kind of what I described last week, that you are going to get the body that looks a lot like your body. It'll be healed, it'll be good, but it's still your body, and that's going to be rejoined then with your spirit. That happens when Christ returns again. And then there is this judgment day, but even when we say judgment day, it probably would be more helpful to us to think of it as a sentencing day, right? The judgment in some sense has already been made. The case is closed, but it is on this day. Well, let me read some of what happens at this occasion. It's interesting to me. This is Jesus' words in Matthew 25. He says, "When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, he will sit on his glorious throne. And all the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate the people one from another as a shepherd separates sheep from goats." It is on this day that people either learn, yes, heaven is mine, or they are moved to hell. This is what happens. And of course, when you start to think about this, you think, well, tell me a little more about that return of Christ. Like, how does it work? When is it going to happen? Those are important questions. And the scriptures actually give us a pretty good description in 1 Thessalonians about how it's going to work. This will be wild to some of you, but beautiful probably at the same time. He says this, "Brothers and sisters, we don't want you to be uninformed about those who sleep in death." And it's interesting that Paul often uses the reference of sleep to refer to death. I think it's his way of saying, yes, death is real. Your heart stopped beating, your brain waves stopped. All that is true. And yet it's not the end. In some sense, you're just asleep, waiting for the resurrection. And he's saying here, I think, to just the same way I'm trying to say it to some of you, I don't want you to be uninformed. I want you to know how this is going to work. So that, there's a purpose in this, so that you do not grieve like the rest of mankind who have no hope. You know, it is one of the worst experiences I have when I am present at a funeral and either the person who has died was clearly not a follower of Jesus, and we're not just mourning their loss from this life, but it seems hopeless for their eternity. Or when I'm having the funeral of someone who is a follower of Jesus, and many people have a hope, they're grieving with hope, but there are people who aren't followers of Jesus, don't believe this is the way it's going to happen, want to have life their own way, and so they grieve like the rest of mankind without any hope. And I got to tell you, grief's hard enough with hope. But grief with hope does mitigate. It's why I think of my dad as with Christ, which is better by far. I have the hope for a reunion one day. There is a hope in our grief. Then he goes on, For we believe that Jesus died and rose again, and we're like Christ. And so we believe that God will bring with Jesus those who have fallen asleep or died in him. According to the Lord's word, we tell you that we who are still alive, who are left until the coming of the Lord, will certainly not precede those who have fallen asleep. So he's talking here about the idea that some have died, and some are going to experience this actually while we're still alive, because we might be alive when the second coming happens. And it's a really a beautiful description. He says, the Lord told us, Jesus told us how this was going to work. It's going to be that those of us who are still alive, we don't get to heaven before the people who have died. It actually describes it this way. For the Lord himself will come down from heaven with a loud command and the voice of the archangel and with the trumpet call of God. Can I do this one more time? It's not that great. It's not that great. But this is the idea that when the second coming, when Christ comes again, it comes with a trumpet. And of course, it's interesting that most of us, I mean, maybe all of us in this room, we don't really think it's going to happen today, right? But it could. And every time I've heard a trumpet, ever since I heard that message in college, it reminds me that like, oh, let this jostle me in all the best ways to be like, but it could. This is what it will be on that day, the trumpet call of God, and the dead in Christ will rise first. This is going to be a wild scene. After that, we who are still alive and are left will be caught up together with them in the clouds and meet the Lord in the air, and so we will be with the Lord forever. So everyone who's died, I did a funeral last week for a wonderful woman who served our church, served Northwest Indiana in so many ways. I'm confident in her faith. I'm confident in her eternity. If Christ comes tomorrow, she and my dad and everyone else go first, and then those of us who believe go next, and we meet in the clouds. Maybe that sounds crazy to you, but if you believe in the resurrection, in Christ's resurrection, then don't let it sound crazy. Let it be a promise that is for us. So that's kind of the process, but each one of those processes are activated by a moment. So the two moments, of course, are our death and Christ's return. Our death and Christ's return. And these two moments are parallel in many ways. They're not exactly the same. Different things happen. I just described that to you, but they're parallel in the sense that they have commonalities so that we would prepare for them in the same way. First of all, there's the timing of these two moments. And when we talk about the timing of these moments, we should just say this. The timing is uncertain. Whether it's your death, you don't know what day that's going to be. Most of us anticipate that it won't be tomorrow, but there are no guarantees that it won't be tomorrow. We are healthy if we live in such a way to say, the future is not mine, the future is God's. Death could come at any time, and I should be prepared. Similarly, with the return of Christ, we are uncertain about when that will be. It could come at any time, and the message is preparation. And there's something that is probably worth also saying, that it's potentially imminent. In the New Testament, there are 300 references to Christ coming again. 3 times in the book of Revelation, he says, I am coming soon. I'm coming soon. Now, I understand why some people scoff and say, yeah, he said that 2,000 years ago. Still waiting. But anyone who looks at the world that way, apparently, I'm not trying to be too critical, but lacks an appreciation for the nature of time. When he says I'm coming soon, he doesn't mean I'm coming tomorrow. He means I could come anytime. Everything has been prepared for me to come. And when you study eschatology, a couple of the passages you'll come across that Peter wrote is he'll say, with the Lord, 1,000 years is like a day, and a day is like 1,000 years. And this will blow your mind for a little bit if you let it, but the concept of time, do you think God lives within time? We live within time. And so God relates to us and uses words and language with us that help us understand that we live within time. But it wouldn't be difficult for you to imagine that God lives outside the dimensions that he created, and he created time. And so for him, the notion of soon, and even think this, even if God did live in time, we understand this. You know, when you're 3 years old and Christmas passes and you have to wait till next Christmas, that's forever. But when you're 80 years old, it's just 1/80th of your life, not 1/3 of your conscious life. And so the longer that you have existed, the less time seems to be calculated in the same ways. And let's say God lives within time and he has lived, I'll say forever, but let's just try billions. Let's try trillions of years. And now, if you've lived for trillions of years, 2,000 years? Not that long? Soon. Potentially imminent. This is how Jesus says it in Matthew 24. He says, but about that day or hour, no one knows. The day when Christ is going to come again, no one knows. If anyone tells you that they know, they're wrong. They're wrong. Not only do they not know, Jesus tells us that he doesn't know. Not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. That within the Trinity, with a self-imposed limitation, as can happen in the Trinity, absolutely happened when Jesus took on flesh and became one of us, he's limited even his knowledge of when it will come. The idea is no one knows. And so the moment's message, the message of death or the message of Christ's second coming, is simply readiness. Readiness. When my kids were young, my older kids were young, my wife went on a mission trip once. Now, I had been traveling a lot. I'd been on lots of trips. You know, when I'm gone, seems like she takes care of the kids, no problem. But all of a sudden when she's gone, I'm like, so can my mom come, and help us out a little bit? She's like, you don't need your mom. I'm like, I feel like I kind of do, but okay, I can handle it. I can handle it. And, she left, and first day went pretty well. And second day, not so well, right? Everything was falling apart. And I mean, Jenny, she runs a good, tight, healthy ship, and things are clean, people are in place, they're to bed on time, baths are done, all that stuff. And all of a sudden, it's chaos, right? And I started to think I told her it was going to be fine. It's not really fine. But she's not coming home for 10 days. So how about we play it this way? Kids, we're just going crazy for 10 days. That's what we're going to do. I know when the second coming is happening, and it's not until 10 days from now. So let's live it up. Let's eat chicken nuggets every day. Let's, baths when they work. I don't know. And then the day before mom gets home, we're going to huddle up, and we're going to say, she's coming home. Let's put this house back in order. Let's get everything straight. I, of course, had the advantage of knowing when she was coming home. If she was on a trip and she was in the country and she had said, I'm not sure when I'm going to be back. Might be tomorrow, might be 3 days, might be 8 days. That's a different ball game, right? All of a sudden, I'm huddling with the kids every morning. I'm like, kids, it might be today. We got to be ready for mom to come home. Now, I think there's something to that with our readiness for Christ's return. You might anticipate that it's off in the future sometime. You might think you know. You don't think you know the day. You just think you know it's not today. But you don't know. And it changes our posture toward the day. It's a posture of readiness. This is what the scriptures say. Therefore, keep watch, because you don't know what day your Lord will come. But understand this, if the owner of the house had known what time of night the thief was coming, this is his illustration. The thief in the night language is a regular image that Jesus gives us to say it's unknown. He would have kept watch and would not have let his house be broken into. So you also must be ready, because the Son of Man will come at an hour when you do not expect him. So this is my question. Are you ready? I don't ask it with fear or with guilt or anything else. I ask it as someone who cares about you and thinks it's worth thinking about the most important things in life. Are you ready? Now, this is kind of an interesting question in of itself, because maybe your house is different than mine, and I'm not going to out the particular people. But when I'm ready to go out the door and I say, "Are you ready? Are you ready to go?" They say yes, but they're not ready. They still have to get their shoes on. Oh, I need to go to the bathroom. Maybe change my shirt. I'm like, you said you were ready, but you were not ready. And readiness is the posture. Now, how are you going to respond to this? No doubt some people in the room will respond to it with anticipation. You're good with God. You trust Christ. You've given your whole life to him. You live a surrendered life. It's not a perfect life. It's not. But you know heaven's waiting for you. So there's an anticipation. Others of you may face this with some trepidation, some adjustment, because you also know about your life. And you think, I'm not ready. If I'm being honest about it, I'm not ready. And I pray that today, or at least through the course of this series, you'll consider what that means and you will be ready. And it's totally possible some people in the room are just indifferent, apathetic. You're like, NFL drafts started, can I get home? And we let the things of this world, the busyness of this life, the things that grab our attention, live as a higher priority for us than the most important things in life. And so I'm asking you to consider whether you're ready and respond to it in an appropriate way. Well, I really hope that was helpful for integrating faith with life. Listen, if you're in Northwest Indiana, I'd love to have you join us in person. Head over to suncrest.org and plan your visit.